now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here is Reverend Martin.
Good evening. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Let me get that on my chest first of all. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad you made it. Glad to have the privilege and the opportunity to address you where you are and whether it's day or night. And I know a lot of us have changed our listening and our viewing habits. And I'm just glad that you stumbled across this broadcast or this clip here on YouTube or on Facebook or on whatever social media you may have chance to address it upon. I'm delighted to address you, sir and madam. Our marching orders come from the 5th chapter of James and chapter 4, which says, "Behold, the hire of those who have reaped down your fields, which of you is kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of those that reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth." Those are our marching orders because that opens up the entire New Testament to the perusal of a whole new generation of people. Most of us are what are known as the Joshua generation. I'm not as young as Joshua, but thank God for you Joshua folks. And we are delighted to share with you. You'll see me glancing down or looking down. Hey, that's the way it is when you're working by yourself. And one of the backup scriptures from the Old Testament that supports the just payment of economic justice for those who labor and who work and who toil, and I believe that's about most of us, is in the Old Testament, in the Tanakh, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 24, and believe it or not, verse 14. And this is what it says, if I may take time to read it in your hearing. It says, "Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in thy land within thy gates. At his day," that means when he gets through working that very day. The Bible didn't recognize work a week or work 2 weeks and then finally get paid. If you worked that day, you got paid that day. "At his day thou shalt give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor, and setteth his heart upon it, lest he cry against thee unto the Lord, and it be sin unto thee." So you have the Old Testament and you have the New Testament admonition that the laboring person is to be justly compensated. An honest day's pay for an honest day's work. It's an old adage right here in America, although it is very, very sadly honored more in the breach than in the observance. But that is what you and I battle against. That's what the $15 an hour minimum wage was to address. That is what you confront every time you walk into the boss's office and ask him or her for a raise. That's the sad reality for too many of our people who are in service sector jobs at these various restaurants, starting out at the bottom, knowing that you work all day, you work all week, you work all month, and yet by the time you get some money to take home, you have lost a great deal. You don't have what you need. You need sometimes 2 and 3 jobs just to equal one job. And of course, these days you're defrauded on your hours, because if they let you work 40 hours, then of course they have to start paying you permanent. And one of the tricks or the devices that the system employs is that you don't get to work a 40-hour week no more. You only get to work, 35, 39 or less. And quite frankly, you have to ask your question, how you expect me to make it on that kind of money? And that has become a very destructive device that the employer uses all across this nation. And I see it being utilized here in Los Angeles at these various workplaces, and sadly enough, even in the city halls and in the county governments and in the state government of our state of California here where we are. And I shudder to think that they're doing that at the federal level, but I wouldn't put it past them. But according to the Bible, according to the scripture, you're all supposed to be social activists and strive for economic justice. If they don't pay you, don't work for them, because you got to get an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. You're entitled to that. Yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, male or female, you're entitled to get paid for what you do. And salaried people, waged people, and there's a friend of mine who talked about unwaged workers, which means women and others who work in the home without and don't get paid at all directly. Work is what? Important. Labor is valuable. Once you put your labor out there, you cannot get it back. And as I've said since beginning this broadcast, we had 250 years of unpaid, unrequited toil, as Abraham Lincoln phrased it or described it in his second inaugural address. And that's long enough to work for free, believe me. The head start that the dominant social order has on the rest of us, especially as the black folks, is difficult to overcome. And the way things are going, we see that right now I hate to say the African American is now a third-class citizen in his own country. That's a hard thing to say. But in employment and in wealth accumulation based upon wages paid, hours worked, we're being marginalized in the job market. And the sooner that we recognize that and push back against that, the better it will be. When you're young, you can say, hey, I'm going to make it. When you get old, what are you going to say if you didn't make it? And so we have to recognize what the writer in Scripture, Ephesians, says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, although that may be flesh and blood looking at you, attempting to defraud you in your wages, but actually you're wrestling against principalities, powers. Professor John A. Powell says that racism is a structure. It is a structure, and it is a structure of denial of opportunity, and the very fact that you get denied the opportunity means that someone has actually labored and manipulated or orchestrated the circumstances or the conditions that kept you from being made aware that that opportunity was there. I have a friend of mine who is an architect, a very successful architect in Houston, Texas. And he and I were talking, and he was discussing with me some of the problems that even he runs into in that white-collar world. He's a graduate of Booker T. Washington there in Houston, Texas, graduate of the University of Houston in engineering, top of his class. And yet he said when the first job interview he went on there in Houston, the man said, the white fellow pulled him to the side and said, "Now, I don't want you to think that you are not qualified." He said, "You overqualified." He said, "But we're not going to hire any black folks to work here for this company. So you can sue us, you can take us to court, but we're just not going to hire any black people to work here." And and believe me, this is one of the top-notch architectural engineers. Let me get it straight. They are in the city of Houston. So yes, you are qualified, you are prepared educationally, but the opportunities that one would normally have seem to be missing. And they're not missing because they're not there. They're missing because someone else has decided that based upon the color of your skin, that we are going to block you or deny you the opportunity to prosper or to gather wealth or to gain wealth or to develop an inheritance to pass on to your children. Hey, you only have so many working years. I think Social Security says you only have about 35 good working years. And after that, who knows? And most of us are getting a little long in the tooth and we're still working, still trying to make it, still trying to hold on. We're still working from kin to can't. At this 2018 time, a lot of us are still working from since we started working until we just can't work no more. And a lot of it don't say it, but a lot of people are anxious, uncertain, frightened when you look to the future. Where is the money going to be when I get too old to work? Where's the money going to come from? And we suffer from this economic insecurity. Go back to James chapter 5 and verse 4. The hire of those who have reaped down your fields, which of you is kept back by fraud. We are going to have to petition this government for a reparation, for a making whole, for a remediation, for a putting back in place or in position the wages or the that we did not get because of the denial of opportunity. And I know we think we live in a colorblind society. I don't know about you, but anybody that's colorblind, I don't want to be one around as a dangerous person because they are unsafe. When you can't tell one color from another, you are unsafe. You can't tell a red light from a green light. No. You shouldn't be on the street driving. There is no such thing as a colorblind society. And we need to get away from that mythology and just call it like it is. And who is it that we're colorblind against, or that you are colorblind against? Is it black people? Or is it Asian? Is it white people? Right. We're neither post-racial nor colorblind. And so we have to at least acknowledge the truth if we're going to ever move forward. And you can put that in your pipe and smoke it. We have a society that's built on denial of rights, denial of privilege, denial of pay, denial of service, denial of housing, denial of employment, denial of medical care, denial of education. This nation is in a deep denial that must be overcome. And how are you going to overcome a problem when you don't recognize that there is a problem? And so these are some of the preliminary thoughts thoughts, preliminary problems that we will be addressing in the coming weeks and months here on this little segment. Right now, we're starting out doing 30 minutes to see how well we can handle it and how do we get over our anxiety attacks, talking into a camera to someone who's going to see it a long time from now and wonder just how do we look. Hey, it's not, I am what I am. I'm here, and I love you. I care for you. I want to see you do better. I want to see you do good, and want to see you succeed and overcome in life. And we all have a great mission in life. I believe that we're all put here for a reason, for a purpose. You're not just here to look into the camera or here to look at the monitor or the computer screen or the television set. We are here for a purpose. You have work to do. And we've all got to put in that work in order to accomplish our goal before our sojourn here on earth is finished. And I firmly believe that. And you look at the great people who have lived, who have actually made a difference to help the society to move forward, not the robber barons, but the social justice, social action people. And they all had something that drove them. They made them get up every morning and continue to labor and to strive and to work and to toil and to push. I think about a young lady who graduated from Harvard University in 2013. And she was a homeless girl growing up. Her mama was homeless. The family was homeless. She went, in 12 years, she went to 12 different schools right here in Los Angeles. And finally, but her mother kept encouraging her, clean yourself up every day, get this stench of homelessness off of you so you won't stink when you go to class. And because you're good as anybody else, you can do the work, you can do the labor, and if you get an education, you got a chance in life. And that young lady's name is Khadijah Williams, born right here, raised right here. And she and her family, her mother was homeless. All of this girl's existence, of Khadijah's existence. She's a young lady now. But yet, through that type of motivation and through the interest of her teachers and people that took an interest in her, she kept on studying. She spent a lot of days in the public library reading, studying, preparing, and it paid off. They moved when they couldn't stay at the Union Rescue Mission right here in Los Angeles. They stayed at the bus station down there on 6th Street and over there by Alameda. I'm saying all of this to say that the drive, the push, the motivation, the determination must be in all of us. Now, that young lady graduated from Jefferson High School with honors, and when she graduated, she had the opportunity to go to 20 different colleges, and she chose Harvard University. Yes, a young lady who grew up homeless, not started out homeless, grew up homeless right here in Los Angeles, California, went to Harvard University from Jefferson High School. Somebody who stayed at the Union Rescue Mission went to Harvard. Do you hear me? And one thing I have to do is to motivate you to keep pushing regardless. And in 2013, Oprah Winfrey was the commencement address speaker for the graduating class of Harvard University. Guess whose name she called? Among the others, she called this young lady's name Khadijah Williams. What a great testimony. What an inspiring story of overcoming all of the obstacles. Can you imagine being homeless, staying in the Union Rescue Mission every night? She herself said that graduating from Harvard does not just give you a foot in the door, it opens the door. So we want to encourage you. I don't want to just tell you the problem. I want to encourage you to help join with me in solving this problem, in resolving these difficulties, because these difficulties can be overcome and they must be overcome. I don't know if you've seen some of the other clips where we talk about the fact that housing in the United States of America in the early years of the 20th century, we're now in the 21st, that the FHA and what was known then as the Homeowners Loan Commission or Corporation, that was the commission that drew up a map of all of the cities of the United States of America, and they colored that map green, yellow, he had another color. But the basic color for you and I was a color called red. Red was where the colored people, or the Negro people as we were known at that time, lived. And the federal government would not make loans to the red zone. They codified it. If it was a red zone, no loans in there. Loans were made in the green zone. Oh, that's what it was. It was the green zone. That was the highest level. Then there was the blue zone. That was the next level to be developed. And then the yellow zone, that was very iffy. And then the red zone, that's where the rest of us were left. Now, Negroes were never in the green zone. They were never in the blue zone. They were never in the yellow zone. No, we were always in the red zone. That's where the word red line comes from, because we were basically penciled out of home ownership in the early part of this century. I'm not talking about slavery. I said the early part of the century, starting after 1877, which is a very monumental year. Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, talks about the Civil War happened because they wouldn't compromise, but he's a liar, because there was nothing but compromise. But for your and my discussion, beginning in 1900, and especially in the 1930s, there was a huge depression here in this country, caused by the robber barons, the J.P. Morgans, and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies. They sunk the country into a economic depression, not a recession, a depression. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected, and he began to look for ways to restart the economy. And in order, he had programs brought to him, and in order to make these programs work, he needed the votes of the Southern senators, of the Southern Congress people. Well, the whole impetus and motivation of the Southern congressmen at that time was to keep colored people in their places and to help the white races maintain their domination. They were hell-bent for leather on that thought that white was right and everything else was wrong. And so in order to, and these main point, why you have to be a voter, these Southerners were on every committee, every principal committee, every vital committee, appropriations committee, and what have you. They would now usually the majority on those committees, or they were the chairman of those committees. And in the coming weeks, we're going to talk about some of those Congress people. And but the overall point that I want to make right now is that in order for Franklin Delano Roosevelt to get the economic engine going, he needed the votes of those Southern Congress people. And those Congress people had one motivation: we'll give you our vote, but you must not do anything that helps the colored race, nothing that helps the Negroes. We'll give you our vote, but we need a line of demurrer. We need you to promise us that nothing that you do to help the nation, which is principally white, will help the colored race. And this is how we'll do it. At that time, most farm work was being done by you know who, Negroes, colored folks, sharecropping and the like. Most domestic work, custodial, at that time it was janitorial, and working in the houses, in Miss Ann's house, in the white folks' house, was being done by colored people, as we would determine, and Negroes at that time. And so in order to get their votes, that's what Roosevelt had to agree to, that we will not help the industries where Negroes are concentrated. You had white jobs and you had black jobs. And the jobs where we were concentrated, you couldn't get funding, which means that you didn't get Social Security in 1935. You didn't, if they, when they set the minimum wage, your wage still stayed at 50 cents an hour. And coming out of that into the development of the FHA, HUD, and the VA and the GI Bill, we were excluded from all of that until Social Security started in 1935. We were excluded for the first 20 years. We were at 45, 35 after the war, 45, probably in the 50s, around 54, before you were actually included in the Social Security system. So, hey, it's been stacked against you. But we can overcome, we can win. Once you recognize what the problem is and who the enemy is, and what methodology has been employed historically to hold us down, then you can begin to formulate a methodology and a process to push back against the things that are pushing against you. We come down to the last 5 minutes, and so we're going to be wrapping up, but I hope you will listen again to other segments, and I will help you as best I can to understand the situation so that you don't be down on you, be up. Remember what Jesus says, be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. If he overcame, you can overcome. You must, and you will, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. Remember, God says that if they're cheating you, then he sees it. And if you have God on your side, then you have the greatest force in the universe, greater than any federal agency or the federal government, that can help you to overcome the things that would indeed hold you down. God bless you and God keep you is our prayer. Thank you now.